If you've been thinking about getting your CDL or maybe just got into it, one of the first questions on your mind is probably how much money am I going to make my first month? So you've probably seen ads saying, you'll make 1,500 bucks a week or $80,000 your first year or six figures your first year while driving a truck. But while those numbers can be real eventually, the truth is the first month with your CDL looks very different than all of those ads. So in this video, I'm going to break down exactly how much you can realistically expect to make your first month based on your training pay, the type of carrier that you pick, cents per mile, salary or hourly, home time, and then common rookie mistakes that you can make that can affect your paycheck. So let's get right into it, and by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how much a new driver such as yourself will make your first month and why some drivers make way less than expected. So let's get into it and see how you can set yourself up for success. So the first thing that you need to understand is this: your first month is always going to be the lowest paying month as your CDL driving career starts. So it's not because trucking is a bad career, but it's usually because your first month is split up into multiple phases. So you're not full-time driving yet. So most new drivers go through things such as orientation, on-the-road driving with a trainer, and then partial solo driving. So you're not running those hard miles yet, and you're not getting paid like an experienced driver yet. So when someone says, I only made $800 my first month, that doesn't mean that trucking pays poorly in general. It just means that they were in the learning phase and they were with the wrong company. So let's start with that training pay, because this is where most of your money your first month is going to come from. So if you went through a mega carrier such as a large company, your first month looks like your CDL school pay. Sometimes it's unpaid if you go through a private school. Sometimes you'll have paid training. It really just depends. You'll also have some orientation pay and some training pay as well. So your orientation pay, if you're going to orientation, getting set up with the company and all that stuff, is usually going to be $100 to $150 per day. And your training pay is usually paid out to you weekly at a flat rate, and that usually looks like $600 to $900 per week. So while some companies may pay more, some might pay less, this is usually the normal range. So if your first month looks like you have 1 week of orientation and then 3 weeks with a trainer, you might expect somewhere between $2,400 to $3,200 gross for the entire first month, and that is before taxes. So yeah, that number surprises a lot of people. Now, once you start driving after your first month, you get paid CPM, which means cents per mile. So your typical starting CPM is going to be 40 cents to 55 cents for most new drivers. And here's the part that most people don't usually understand is your miles your first month are usually pretty low. And that's because you're usually learning routes, your dispatch doesn't fully trust you yet, you might take longer at shippers, and you might often get shorter loads. So instead of running 2,500 to 3,000 miles a week, you might run 1,600, 1,800, maybe 2,000 if you're really getting the hang of it. So let's do some simple math real quick. So if you run 1,800 miles at 45 cents per mile, that is $810 gross for the week. So if you multiply that by 4 weeks, you'll gross about $3,200 for the month. So that lines up very closely with what a lot of new drivers will actually say. Now, let's talk about take-home pay, because gross pay doesn't pay the bills. So after taxes, Social Security, state taxes, depending on where you live at, Medicare, insurance, most drivers take home about 70 to 75% of their gross pay. So if you gross $3,000, you're bringing home $2,100. If you gross $3,500, you're taking in around $2,400 to $2,600. So that means your first month take-home pay is often $2,000 to $2,500, and that is completely normal, guys. So let's break this down into a few real-world scenarios, a few different paths that you can choose to make the most money possible. So if you go with the mega carrier route with a company-provided training program where they give you your CDL, it's an awesome choice. So you'll get paid your orientation, your training, you'll get limited miles, and you'll get your flat training pay. So that first month, when you're doing everything, you're looking at around $2,500 to $3,200, and you're going to take home about $1,800 to $2,400. And this is a very common situation for a lot of people who are trying to get started trucking with a paid training program. Another route you can take is a private CDL school, which you get hired pretty quickly out of. So if you paid for CDL school yourself and jump straight into solo driving, you're going to get into the higher cent per mile range faster, and you're still going to have some low miles early on. So your first month gross, if you go through a paid training program, is usually about $3,200 to $4,000, and you'll probably take home about $2,300 to $2,900. So it's better money, but you're going to have more responsibility right away. And also you can land a local or hourly job right off the rip, which is pretty rare for new drivers. So some drivers land jobs such as dump trucks, food service, construction, yard, or shuttle jobs, and your hourly pay range is going to look like $20 per hour to $26 per hour, and you're going to be working 40 to 55 hours per week. So starting off in local, you're actually going to get paid more your first month because you get an hourly rate. Your first month gross is going to be $3,500 to $4,800, and you're going to take home about $2,600 to $3,400. So these jobs are next to near impossible to get without experience, but they are possible if you do know somebody and can work your way in. So let's talk about why a lot of new drivers say, I barely made anything my first month, and they get discouraged and they end up leaving the business as a whole. So here are the biggest reasons. Late loads equals less freight next week. Also, you might have some poor time management starting out. You take too many breaks, too much downtime at truck stops, and you might get home too early. So getting home during your first month is going to kill your miles. Also, lack of communication. You got to get comfortable with reaching out to your dispatchers, letting them know that you're empty early. And also, you have to plan ahead, which is something that you will learn as you go along. So these things matter way more your first month than later on. And here's what I want you to understand. Your first month is not your trucking career. It's the foundation. Month one is all about learning the job, staying safe, building trust with your dispatch, avoiding accidents and tickets. And if you survive month one clean, month two is going to pay more, and month three pays even more. And by month six, most drivers are grossing about $1,200 to $1,500 per week, and that is when it starts to feel worth it. So here's 5 things you can control right away to make some more money. Run when freight is available. Communicate early and communicate often. Avoid unnecessary home time. And trip plan like it matters, because trip planning is one of the biggest things you could do to maximize your cents per mile. And don't rush and don't quit. Drivers who stick it out often see their pay jump very, very fast. So let's answer the question honestly. How much will you really make your first month with a CDL? So for new drivers, you're going to take home $2,000 to $2,500 cash. That's $3,000 to $4,000 gross. So that's not life-changing money yet, but it's also just the beginning of your trucking career. So if you could survive the first month, the rest of the year gets so much better. So if this video helped you guys, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more CDL tips and info, and drop a comment if you want some more information on month 2 and month 3 pay expectations. But appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you in the next one.